success to me is like, what are you contributing to this world? What are you giving to this world? I have come to become a really rich human. I feel so rich sitting here talking to you today because of the people that surround me. I was such a sad, dark human. I was literally so lost in the world. It makes me feel a bit emotional thinking about that person because it's just so sad, Sam. So sad. Because I was like existing and I wanted to not be here on multiple occasions. As I honestly wouldn't wish an eating disorder on my worst enemy. It takes everything away from you. I was terrified of going to the other side of the world. Like, I didn't know but I also knew that it was an opportunity I could not take if I wanted to save my life, I guess. And it was clear that I was sicker than I thought I was, and everyone else was, and for me to stay there for the time I needed it cost my mum her house. And it almost feels a total miracle that I am sitting here today feeling with a heart full of love and gratitude. 99.9% of the time I find the light in everything, because I know what the dark is can feel like pitch black, and I lived too many years like that. I think the Laura I am today from 3 years ago is probably a bigger gap because of 3 weeks that happened 3 years ago that changed my life beyond all recognition, really.
Laura finds the story that's yet to be told, the voices that are yet to be heard, and the questions that are yet to be asked. Today I'm joined on the podcast by the truly inspirational Laura Hearn. She's a journalist, storyteller, mental health advocate, and the host of the incredible Flip It podcast. Laura opens up and shares her powerful story through grief, her eating disorder, mental health struggles, and heartbreak. During this wonderful, heartfelt conversation, Laura proves how you can flip your life around for the better, turn negative situations into positive ones, and ultimately find your true, authentic self. Be comfortable in your own skin and start to live the life that you deserve. She is a beautiful soul, both inside and out, and I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I did recording it. I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. Okay, welcome, the lovely Laura Hearn. Laura, how are you?
Thank you, Sam. So nice to be here on the other side of the desk for a change. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here, and can't wait.
I must admit, I've been so excited about when we first met, and then we met for that coffee, and we're sitting there chatting about, and obviously you've got an incredible podcast called Flip It, which I was obsessed with. The first episode I listened to, I think I listened to every episode within about a week, and it was incredible because you are one hell of a storyteller, and there's so many things that align with, what we think about storytelling and the stories that we share, and it was just amazing. I was hooked when I listened to the podcast the first time, and I know we sort of spoke about this, and I'm so glad that we're here.
Oh, well, thank you, Sam. It's actually come from a very random meeting that I wasn't even meant to go to, and you were somewhere and I was there, and as soon as I saw you and met you, I felt this instant connection of like warmth and a pure, kind soul, and I thought I need to know that man, and it's been lovely since then, and I'm loving my cap. I have to mention the cap because you were like, do you want a cap? And I was like, yeah, have you got this colour? Have you got green? Have you got this colour? And you were like, oh my God, I've got this colour, every other colour but. But I've turned up today and I'm loving my cap, so thank you. I love the black
It's looking
one.
great.
Yeah.
It's looking great. I know it was funny. So I've got my brand colours, and green doesn't fit into them. But let's see what we can do. We've got a black one, and we're okay, and we're winning. But
I love my black one. Thank you.
Good. Right. Well, look. We're going to jump straight in, and it's actually quite interesting because I mentioned to you a little bit before we come on. I generally, what I'm starting with for this series, especially, is I always talk about success and what that means to people, and we generally go through their story and talk about that towards the end. But quite, I guess, it's in a way that we're flipping it, right? There we go. We're flipping it. I'm turning it to the start. So I want to. My ultimate goal is, as you know, like I want to help the world, I guess, to see success differently, but trying to define what that means to people. And I've asked every single person that's come on. So we'll jump straight in, and that's how we're going to kick things off for this one. So just kick us off. How do you define it? What does success mean to you?
Success, it's that word, that one thing that we're all, well, there's a couple of words that I think we're all striving for, but success, it's, for me, it's just not about money. I mean, it is everything but money. When I talk about being a rich human, it's really how I feel in here. And my career has taken me to being in the rooms with some of the world's most powerful people, as you would put them on paper, powerful politicians, actors, celebrities. I then ended in a world with lots of people with lots of money, like money that you and I could never even quantify. I'm not entirely sure they can. And the one thing I've always known is that, I've come to know more and more, is that the more money you have, actually, the more miserable you can become. Not always, but it really doesn't define success. And I think people define success by how much is in your bank account. A lot, I think society do, as a generalization, or a particular title, or a particular name, or role in a company. And we look at people and we think, oh my God, they're so successful, they've got this kind of house, or they've got this car, or they've been on that holiday, and they're like, you get like FOMO, or like, oh, when am I going to make it? But what is enough? Whenever I've spoken to people, the more you have, it's never quite enough, because you think, oh, well, if I just had, one more car, or just another 100,000 or whatever. And it's never quite enough. You always want more. And so I think I have come to become a really rich human. I feel so rich sitting here talking to you today because of the people that surround me and have come into my life and have shown me love and kindness, gone out of their way when they didn't need to. And so I think when I put my head on the pillow, I may not have billions or millions or even hundreds of thousands or even less than that in the bank account. But my God, do I feel like a rich human. And success is something that I've never felt successful. I think you and I were talking a little bit before that I was not very academic. I'm still not very academic. And I would have loved to have been a vet, really, if I'd known my times tables or been any better at maths or science or whatever. But or even in law, I love sort of like criminal law and things. But I've always been a creative. I'm not that academic, and so success, I don't know, like I remember I remember my dad actually once saying, and I love him for it now, but at the time it cut quite harsh, when I was at university, and he was like, well, you will get a first or something, won't you? There's just no point getting less than a 2-1 or a first. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what if I don't? Like, I don't know if I will. Because we quantify success with like markers or numbers or titles, and actually, do I think I'm a successful human now? Yeah, I think I'm getting there. If I look back at my life and things that I've overcome, or things that I've done now, I think Flip It has probably been, it's taken me decades to get there, but I think Flip It has probably been the thing that I think has given me my passion and my purpose, and to think that I'm contributing to the world. And so, yeah, I'm coming around this in a very long-winded way. It's a very long answer, but actually I think I've answered it. Success to me is like, what are you contributing to this world? What are you giving to this world? And I finally feel like I am doing that. So yeah, I feel kind of successful.
Love that. Honestly, I'll get. There's so many things.
That was very
It's-
long.
No,
answer.
but it's brilliant because I think it defines like for me listening to how you're talking about it would be why we connected pretty much instantly, right? Where there's it aligns so much with the whole mission of what I'm trying. I guess I'm trying to do with the podcast exactly that. I feel exactly the same as you do with Flip. Where you go, I'm trying not to measure the success of the podcast even by how many views I've got or how many followers I've got and all of them things, and just going, am I doing something that lights me up? Am I doing something that I feel is contributing, and maybe I'll get one message from someone saying I listened to that episode and it really made a difference to me. That'd keep me going for another 2 years. You know, I've got enough in the locker to keep me going, because I think if someone mentioned to me on the podcast, a guy called Dan Gainsford, we talked about suicide and subjects around that, and he lost someone very close to him to suicide. But he's on a journey to try and help that as well, try and reduce that suicide rate. And he was like, if we can just change our little corner of the world, and maybe there's some ripple effects then. And
Yeah, because one story. This is why you and I love stories. Is like you might think you've just made the difference to one person, but you won't. It will have been multiple people that you will never even know, because it's a ripple effect. And so, like and people do, like I'm the same. It's like I had to let go of like how many people are actually listening to this podcast. Like, is it really, is it successful? And then I have people in my inner circle, go, was it making you money? I'm like, no, it's not making me money. Actually, I'm spending money on it. Well, why are you doing it? Well, because I can't not do it. And because if you go into something, I think, with the idea that the sole purpose is to make money, you'll never make money. It will never be a success, because you have to do something from the heart. And so it's very hard. Like you and I, you have to let go of all the outside noise of like, well, how many followers, how many people? And it's like, just do it. And it will grow, I think, anyway, authentically. And you will have made, I love your podcast too, which is why I'm here.
Oh, you're a star. But I do. It's exactly that. Actually, it's what put that question. People, as soon as I say, "Oh, podcast host," like, "Oh, have you monetized that yet?" No. But I love it, and even when I talk to my kids about it, he's on the podcast today, Daddy, and they can tell how much it excites me and how much I love it, and they go to school and go, "My daddy's a podcaster," and I'm like,
I love it.
So for me, I'll look at it and go, that could be seen that says, because ultimately what I want them to see, what I want my kids to see, is that it doesn't matter what you do, but do you love it, and does it light you up? And that's got to be, that in itself has got to be an element of success, right?
100%.
Love that. But I do want to now go back, because again, with any great story, as you know, like there's a beginning. I always want to find out about that part of our lives, and I think there's so much. I mean, we talked offline before we come on about childhood, and sometimes how them things in childhood impact us and shape a little bit who we are. So take me back to the beginning. To what do I need to know about your childhood and about Laura Hearn-a, who sits in front of me now?
Oh my goodness. I haven't really been asked that question for a long time, and it's funny because I have talked about my past many times, but generally in a therapy room. And it's just, honestly, sitting here today, I feel light years away from that person that was before, because it's funny actually. I had a couple of people. Last Sunday I went to this like afternoon drinks thing that I was invited to, and someone came and said, "You've got to meet Laura. She's like so full of energy. She's like so light." And I was like, "God, you're talking about me, aren't you?" And honestly, if that person had met me 10 years ago, well, I wouldn't have even been invited, basically, because I was such a sad, dark human. I was literally so lost in the world. Actually, it makes me feel a bit emotional thinking about that person, because it's just so sad, Sam. So sad. God, why am I crying? This is terrible. I hope I'm allowed to cry on here.
Of course you are. time.
as a little girl, Laura was lost then. Yeah, I guess I might. It's not a sob story because this is like so many things. So many things that I've been through. It's just human part of life. But my parents, I guess they divorced when I was very young, like 6 or 7, and I don't really remember having my dad around. And it was a very difficult time, I know, for my mum. And I did always continue seeing my dad, but I don't remember them ever being in the same house together. And the house that was my family home was I hated it. I realised how much I hated it. It was just a really spooky house, and it's come up quite a lot in some conversations that I've had with my therapist recently, actually. But really, I guess my feeling as a child, as I was growing up, was not fitting in, I suppose, and feeling quite lost. And I'd get lost in my own imagination, and I think it was a place to escape. But I guess I'm trying to put many decades into a short version. But my mum, I guess there were a couple of things that really stood out in the chapters of my life, I suppose. My mum did remarry eventually when I was about, I forget the timeline, she'll tell me the timeline was wrong, but 9 or something, to an amazing guy Michael, who was my stepdad. And he really did bring me and my sister up. Or I think he kind of saved us from a really difficult time. And he really was, was the biggest father figure to me. My dad, I saw my dad and I love him very much. And he remarried, and I have a half sister and things, but there were some difficulties around that with, I don't want to go into detail about that, but there were some difficulties around that adjustment. And but Michael really, it's really hard to describe him, but he was quite a funny man. He was like, I used to think he was like a bit old and fuddy-duddy, and he loved Frank Sinatra. And at the time I was like, who's Frank Sinatra? And he would be like, he loved a whiskey and he loved a cigar, and he would make me put my slippers on when I went in between 2 rooms and turn the lights off. And I really thought he was a real nag, actually. And all those things that I really love now. I turn the lights off and I put my slippers on, and I love Frank Sinatra. But sadly he was taken away from me before I was able to tell him all of that. When I was 18, he was killed in a car crash, and there was a lot of guilt I had around that, because we had come back from a holiday that he had worked so hard to be able to go on, because he was not very well at the time, and the doctors hadn't let him go before, but this was one trip and they said you could go. And when we came back, we came home to a burglary. Our house had been burgled and it was very chaotic. And he went to the office to pick up some things. And I when you play you play stories in your head and you create up narratives. And I don't know if this narrative is true really, but it's the story I played in my head. That I meant to apologise to him for being a bit of an annoying teenager on this holiday that he so wanted to have. And I remember thinking I will apologise to him and sort of tell him how much I love him. And I never really told him that enough, I don't think. And anyway, I didn't come home that night, and that guilt ate me up for most of my entire life until maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I punished myself and ate me up. It did eat me up. I literally, I didn't know it at the time, but I developed I developed a severe eating disorder, anorexia, and I had no idea that it was linked to that at all. I just went away traveling. I just left the country, and I don't know, I would never do that to my mum now, but I left the country and went traveling, and halfway during that trip I started to be very strange around food, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. And when I came back, it got significantly worse really rapidly. And but at the time no one really talked about eating disorders. This was back in 2000 or something, and wasn't even on I don't even think Facebook existed then, and so, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. All I knew is that a monster had taken over my head, and was just like not on this planet. Like, I was angry, I was throwing food, I was hiding food, I crashed my car, I like lost loads of weight, and yeah, I suppose that set the story for many more years that I was in and out of treatment, and inpatient at times, couldn't get help on the NHS as I wasn't sick enough, and eventually I was very lucky, and I was able to go to this place in America as an inpatient for 8 months, and it saved my life. And it saved my life because it was very different. It was a place where the founder who set it up had recovered herself, and she had her own story, and she knew what was needed to not be clinical. It was very much healing the soul and the spirit as much as your physical self. It wasn't about feeding you up and chucking you out, which is often the mentality and approach. And and this is why I still love stories, is half the staff had recovered themselves, and there's nothing like hearing a personal story and seeing that in front of you. There is another way to live. And it was brutal. Like, they take everything away from you, your phone, you're not, it's like, but it was also in the most warm, beautiful place, in a house. It wasn't in a hospital, and I really did heal there. But that was probably just the start of my healing, because I needed a lot more time when you come out, and it's a whole adaptation thing. So I suppose that has been one parallel of my story, and then the other part has been my career at the BBC, and I did manage them both pretty well.
How did you talk to me about that, like that? Because obviously, firstly, thank you for sharing that, I guess, and I'm hearing it. A couple of things. One, that point where you went to America, was there something? What happened at that point that made you make that choice to go, I've got to get better, this is my route out? What was the...
Because I was like existing, and I wanted to not be here on multiple occasions, as I honestly wouldn't wish an eating disorder on my worst enemy. It takes everything away from you, like, literally. I was going to lose my job, I'd lost my friends, and the one passion that I have is riding horses, and I often don't like talking about horses. I don't know why. It's my imposter syndrome. It's because I think it makes me sound like I'm really posh and stuck up and well, but it's not. I've like begged, borrowed, and stolen horses anywhere I've gone to, like, borrow a ride, because I can't not be around them. It's like my mental health, like, it's like this place where I literally don't think about anything. And for my eating disorder, it's the only place where when I was there and present with them, I didn't think about it. I wasn't thinking, what will I eat? What will I eat? What will I do? Like, how can I exercise? But it was just, and I remember the day when I tried to get on a horse, and I just couldn't. I had nothing, and I thought, you have taken everything from me, my one, like, the thing. And I thought, I don't know, I knew I didn't want to die, but I also didn't want to live. There's that cheesy Robbie Williams song. And I think there's a line in it, and it's like, that one line summed me up. I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to live either. And I was also exhausted and tired of just living in such darkness. And but I couldn't see a way out, and I tried so much therapy, and but nothing seemed to work. And I know nothing seemed to work because it had to come from me. But I remember, and I was beyond lucky to go to this place, because someone sent me a book, and I was like, not another book. I can read another self-help book. Like, it's like, But the title of it, and I thought, right. So I remember I was in Stoke Newington. I was sitting on my bed in a shared house, and I was like desperate. And I thought, all right, I'm just going to sit and read a couple of pages. And I read a couple of pages of this book, and I just burst into tears, because I thought, I can remember now. I think, oh my God, this person gets it. She speaks my language, like no one else had. And then my sister at the time was like looking to see whether I could go to this place. She just bought a house in a cul-de-sac in California, and was like, this is the place I'm going to make for people to come to. And there's only 8 there was only 6 beds, I think, actually. And but then obviously we look into it and it costs a fortune. And we don't have that money. And so there was a guy who was a friend of my brother's who was beyond generous and donated some money for me to be able to go for like 6 weeks. And so I waited on the wait list, and then I was like, oh, I was terrified of going the other side of the world. Like, I didn't know but I also knew that it was an opportunity I couldn't not take if I wanted to save my life, I guess. And then I got there, and then it was clear that I was sicker than I thought I was, and everyone else was, and for me to stay there for the time I needed, it cost my mum her house, and she sold her house to pay for my treatment. And I was very lucky, and I keep saying lucky, but she wouldn't have sold her house if out of choice. But she met my other stepdad now, who is just another most beautiful human, and she moved in with him, and it allowed her to sell her house. This, I'm just obviously giving the context, I suppose, but it saved my house, and there were a lot of sacrifices that all members of my family made for me to have that opportunity. And it was interesting because when you're in America, you're either there on insurance or you're really wealthy and you pay for it privately. And there would be girls in there and they were on insurance, and they might get a call the next day to say, oh, we're cutting it, you've got to go. And they were like, nowhere near ready to go. And there were other people who had families who were so wealthy that they just kept on paying, and it wasn't helping them either, because you become institutionalized in a way, and so you can't live there forever in this little bubble, which is what it becomes, and it becomes so safe that you don't want to leave. But I knew there was always an end point, and I had to come back to London and build my life and go back to the BBC, and they were incredibly generous with me. And the reason why they were so generous was down to my editor. He is still a great friend, and I love him to pieces. And again, stories like the time when everyone could see that I was not doing so well and getting sicker, and he took me into the car park for coffee one day, and was just a human, and said, what's wrong, Laura? And just gave me a hug, and I told him, and he said, you take the time you need, and I get it. And he got it because his mum had suffered from depression and mental health, and he had his own script and his own story, and he understood. And so I could have got another editor who, as I sometimes found, were emotionally constipated at times, and been like, well, sorry, Laura, no, but he was like, you go and have to do what you need. And I came back, and I came back, and I had a great career for, but has it been always up and smooth? No, I've had relapses, and I've had, because you're never the same person every day, and I've grown and changed, and there've been other stresses in my life, but I've never allowed myself to go back to that time, to be that sick, because I don't want to anymore. Like, I really was. It was a case of punishing myself. I really was repenting for not feeling good enough, craving my dad's attention, being bullied at school, never feeling like I fitted in, always feeling like I was in the wrong hat or the wrong pair of jeans, just like so uncomfortable in my own skin, hating on my body, and then feeling immense guilt and thinking, well, the only way I can make up that, I know it sounds crazy when I talk about it, but the only way I could repent or tell Michael that I loved him enough was like, well, if I hurt myself enough, and but then it becomes it is a monster. Like, it's like you just don't even know what you're doing. It's like you are not a human. You're just this held hostage by this thing that tells you what you have to do. It's the only way to describe someone with that kind of eating disorder, that you are not even in control. My dad used to say, well, you just need to go large. You just need to have a Big Mac or something. I was like, do you not think yeah, that would be really, really, really easy. Like it's not the same. Like, you can't just I know it sounds silly, and people you say it wasn't a choice. I had no choice until I was given the tools to know how to manage my feelings, because an eating disorder is not it was never like I looked in the mirror and thought, it wasn't really about weight. It was, I didn't even know what I was doing. It was an unconscious thing that just developed because I didn't know how to live in the world and process my feelings. And that is it. It's an emotional reaction.
And it's, I guess it's like people talk about, different forms of depression, and when you're depressed or you feel really low, you don't want to feel necessarily like
yeah, it's not like you snap out of it.
Yeah. And people say to you, you just look at the positive things. It's not that I'm, like you said, you're not necessarily consciously choosing that path or those decisions. It's almost something's got, and that's why it's called an illness. And that's and mental illness is, like you said, when blows my mind really when you listen to it and you think of people who, if someone's broken their arm, you can see that and you go, but when someone has got depression or an eating disorder or they're
whatever it is, sex, drugs,
whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it is. Money is an addiction. Yeah. So it doesn't even matter when I talk about eating disorder or mental health. I don't even really talk about my eating disorder because it's all the same. The reasons why I did what I did are just the same reasons why everybody else has an imbalance or does something to an extreme, because you're trying to escape. You can't quite live in the world. You don't have to process your emotions. But there does come a point, Sam, where you do have a choice. Because at the time, I was given back the power of choice by giving the tools to know how to do different. So when things happen in my life, I do know how to manage them differently now. And if I choose to act on those, I'm conscious of it now. I have a choice. And so, you do have to take some action to get yourself out of situations.
Yeah, I agree.
For me personally, I can only but I do have to do actions.
I completely agree with that. I think it's interesting to say, because we say about choice, and I do always think that there is a choice and there is a point in your life where you do make a decision. But like you said, the only way you can potentially change that direction is by taking some form of action, whatever that. And that's what I'm trying. I guess, like with you, thankfully, I guess the support around you that you had, that helped you to. Had you not had that support, maybe you wouldn't have been able to make that trip, but you did. You've had that support, like you said, with your mum selling her house, and other sacrifice. How does that, like, how it back to that time, like, because I can imagine potentially that again, the feelings of guilt that you felt like with Michael, and then you go on and you talk about that, like with your mum and the other sacrifices other people have made around you. Was there still feelings that? Did that still make you feel guilty as well, or what? What was the feelings there?
I constantly feel like my mum has never ever put that on me that she would have done it, and she did it because you just want to save your child's life. And other the other members of my family have been great. My sister is a real action orientated person and really, like, in a situation of crisis, she's like there sorting it. So she, but she lost a sister for many years. Like, she didn't have a present sister. I didn't have, friends. I probably wasn't a very great friend at times, because you're just not really there. And I realize now the impact of mental health on other people. It's the people around you that suffer as well, and there's not enough support for those people. But when I think about this, when I talk about this person, it's like, it is me, but it's just so far removed from where I am sitting here today, where I just feel like I am so positive. Like, my glass is always half full, hence why I created a whole podcast called Flip It, because I think there is always a way to flip a negative into a positive. And it almost feels a total miracle that I am sitting here today feeling with a heart full of love and gratitude, and I wake up every day by a couple of days or a few hours where I think, oh gosh, today is gotta get through it. But most of the time, pretty much 99.9% of the time, I find the light in everything, because I know what the dark is can feel like pitch black, and I lived too many years like that, and I never want to feel like that anymore, and I just don't. It's not even like I have to try, and so for me that feels like a total miracle.
I mean, there's so many things I just listening to the story and just thinking like, how fucking brave you are, right? Like one to when we're faced with that choice, to make that choice that I'm gonna take this path, following that through, and that, but then taking those experiences that you have done and getting to the place where you are now, and then
I don't feel like it's brave though, Sam. I feel people are brave. Like when I was driving in my car the other day on the way to the station, and I was driving through the most picturesque little village in East Sussex, and I was listening to the radio, and I was listening to a woman recount the journey she made from her house in the Middle East that had been blown up, and was walking. She'd now survived, lost her child on the way, and survived to get to this point where she's now living in a room with 50 people, and she has no idea where she's going to get her next meal from and things. So that to me, I don't feel brave. That is brave or courageous, or do we just do what we have to do to survive because humans are programmed to survive?
I think it's exactly that. I think it's easy to tell ourselves that narrative because there's always going to be someone else worse off than us, right? There's always going to be someone that struggles a lot more than what we have. But I think it's accepting. It's getting to a point where you accept that your struggles are your struggles, and that's what you've had to process and deal with, and that's why it's brave, because you haven't got to be in a war-torn country and go through something like that type of trauma to just be recognised as being brave. You've overcome something, and you've come out the other side, and that for me is and making that choice to do, because not everyone does, and I think to make that choice, but not only that, then to come out and try and follow the path that you are, to try and share other people's stories and try and have an impact on the world, and actually just being brave enough to share your story, to sit here and explain that to people, because people may be listening in a maybe not a great space, but and the one thing that someone as brave as you does do by doing that, for me, the word that comes to mind is gives people hope, right? And that's what we as humans, like, sometimes we just need that little glimmer of hope just to go.
Yeah, and I felt hope, and that's what Carolyn Costin, the woman who wrote the book and set this place, gave me in that moment. Like, I was hopeless. I was like, I've tried everything. I've been everywhere. I'm just never going to get any better. This is it. And I was like, if this is it, I don't want to be here. And she gave me that hope. And you're right. And I think people who are able to share their story and be a bit and give that hope can be a lifeline to someone. And I never talked about it ever before. It was like the elephant in the room. It was bleedingly obvious. But I just was like, because it's almost like a little secret. If you actually talk about it, then then you have to do something about it. And at times it served me, because it was like a protective thing. It was like, it's crazy what mental health is, but you have to want to do different. And so I think anyone who shares their story is brave. And I guess I chose, particularly, it was just that moment this week when I was just driving and I heard that lady speak, and I thought, my goodness, like, it's a real big thing for me, right? The inequality of this world, and the luck of the draw as to where you're born, and I have been really lucky and grateful, and for the amount of support and love that I've been shown during some of the things that I've been through. But brave, I think it's just brave to live at all. Being a human is not easy.
You're absolutely, and you're right. And I think that's how every time I have conversations on here, and I just listen, and I just think exactly that. Like, life is, it can be really fucking hard, right? And we you know, and one of the reasons I talk about it, I want to highlight people, say highlight, but talk about people's challenges or things that we do overcome and stuff, because actually, well, we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about these things enough, and there are people then out there suffering and feel alone and don't know how to communicate that, and don't. No, I just think the more we, I don't even know if normalise is the right word, but the more we have these conversations, just make it acceptable. There's no shame. Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast. Was there feelings of shame? Did you feel shame?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Because I know I have in the part. You feel shameful thinking like you said. You compare. You go, what am I? Why am I doing this to myself? Why am I thinking like this when there's these things happening over here in the world, and how lucky I am, and I'm choosing this, and like you said, you're almost not choosing it because it's not conscious in it. But then that's still that element of shame. But the more we can talk about it, hopefully that eradicates that shame, right?
Yeah, I felt massively ashamed and guilty. I was like, why can't I stop this? I'm hurting people. I'm hurting myself. Why can't I stop it? And I felt shameful about it. I hid myself. Which is so weird that I'm even invited to speak on a podcast now, and I have a podcast because I never even had a voice, or because I wanted to hide it. I wanted to hide everywhere in my life. I didn't, physically, mentally. I just wanted to bleed into the walls and just being insignificant. And I felt shame, massive shame, that I couldn't sort it. But I now talk about it, I guess, because it is, I don't want to negate it as a part of my story, and to negate that would to negate Michael, and I never want to do that. And there have been challenges in my childhood with family members and things, but I love them all, and I do know that I'm loved now. And there were times when I questioned it, but I do, and I just think humans, we're all fallible and we make mistakes. I've made a ton, and I'll make more, I'm sure. And we all just try and do the best we can, and so I have really flipped my energy towards people of not one. I do my best not to be one of judgment and resentment or hatred, but to look at people with an open heart and to think that we're all hurting. Hurt people, and I was hurting, and I didn't want to continue hurting people. And I think it's really helped me to look at people through that lens for my own healing. And I guess as a journalist, and I also have been surrounded by stories, and I started off saying that I'd given a platform and a voice to people who already had a massive platform and a voice. But it was never those ones that made me feel like I was a good journalist or that I'd done a good day's job. It was the people who didn't have a voice, who were too afraid to share it, didn't think that they were worthy enough, that and those were the ones that I always tried to champion and highlight, and they were always the ones that left me feeling at the end of the day that I'd done a good day's job. And they're the voices and the stories that I champion, and I delve the dark web, not the dark web, no, definitely not the dark web, but the realms of the internet, and speaking to people in my local area and wider beyond, to find stories and voices of those that don't get heard, because they're the ones that I think really need to have a platform and to shine the light, because we all we all have stories, multiple stories, and yeah, that's become my life's mission and purpose, really.
Love that. And then because with there's a couple of things I want to go about this week first, like with the journalism side of things. Because obviously you studied journalism at university, right?
Yeah, I did an undergraduate in journalism, and then I did a master's in broadcasting journalism.
But with the, obviously, I know you mentioned when you was a child, like the maybe the feeling lonely and the stories were your escapism, right? And then that's taking you to so landing the job at the BBC, was that the dream job, or is that how you felt at that time? What?
Yeah, I love stories. I'd make them up in my head, but I was always I remember being quite irritating. I would always ask why. I just was never taking no for an answer. Yeah, I was just like, but why? Why does that happen? Or why is that the way it is? And he was like, well, it just does. And I was like, no, it just doesn't. Just doesn't. And I just so curious about the way the world works. Or I remember having lots of Dorling Kindley books, encyclopedias, and learning about wildlife and the universe and things, and thinking, I just wanted to know more and know more about people, and so I guess I always had that curious nature, but I wasn't going to do journalism. This isn't a whole other story, but I did meet someone who told me about a university in Cornwall, and at the time I had no idea what I wanted to do. This was when I came back from Australia. I was working in a restaurant, just earning some money in the summer, and I thought, well, I've been in Australia. I love being on the beach. I was like, I don't want to go to London, a city, a university, and study business or travel and tourism or whatever it was I was going to. I was like, oh yeah, so I just wanted to go to this university. It was in Cornwall. I was like, I want to live on the beach, and then I found out they did journalism. It's an art college, Falmouth College of Arts. It's very well known, and I was like, well, I wasn't going to do art, but they did journalism. And I thought, yeah. I wanted to be Jill Dando. Yeah, obviously not at the end of Jill Dando, but yeah, I loved Jill Dando. Or I wanted to be Judith Chalmers, the woman who presented Wish You Were Here. Because I was like, I just love travelling. And that would be cool. I could just present and, travel and make it. And then obviously I realised they were both journalists, and you don't just get the chance to travel the world. And so right, I need to be a journalist then. That's what I need to be. And so, and I got into this course. And I lived 5 years in Cornwall, which is a very, very beautiful part of my story. I loved being there. It's probably the place where I felt finally that I fitted in, Sam, because it was full of misfits. That's how I called it. It was arty people who suddenly I wasn't that odd. My family background wasn't that quite odd. You could wear what you wanted. People had pink hair, red hair. They were all sorts of things, and I was just like, I found it. I feel like I belong here. It was kind of cool, and so I loved it, and I did live on the beach, and I had a great time. And it was a really lovely community, really small, and but then during the masters, I had to go on you have to find a 2-week placement to go and work somewhere, and most of the people were sort of, well, go to the local paper, and I was like, nah, I'm going to the BBC. And it was probably, I'd always loved the BBC, and I think probably that did come from my dad. He was religiously watched the 6 o'clock news. He would listen to the same, if we were driving in the car, and he would play, every hour the same news goes on, but he'd always make sure at the top of the hour. And I was like, but you heard this an hour ago. Not a lot's changed. It's but it was, and so I grew up listening to the news, and so I wanted to go and work on Jeremy Vine programme at Radio 2. I loved that programme. And I went up 3 times before I finally met the editor who said, okay, and I'd gone up all the way from Cornwall, and it was a lot. And I remember him saying, I watched the show go out, and I met Jeremy, and it was really great. And I remember him sort of shaking my hand as if to say, well, thanks for coming, never see you again, as it were. And I was like, nah. This has taken months. I've come up 3 times. So I said, I'm going to come in tomorrow if that's okay and make the tea, the coffee. And he was like, okay. And I was like, I found a bed to stay in the night. And I went in that week and made tea and coffee. And by the end of the week, he said, do you want some freelance shifts? And I was like,
Wow.
Yep. And so then I had a lovely friend who then had an auntie who in Holloway who let me stay in their house in the spare room. And without her, I would never have been able, because I had no money to pay for anywhere in London. I wasn't being paid. And I worked for a fair few months for nothing. But just working on the Jeremy Vine programme, I loved it. And I learnt so much, completely out of my depth. I don't even think, I'm being really honest, I don't even think I knew what the cabinet was then. And I was like learning all about Westminster, and I was like, oh my gosh. But I just ate and breathed everything that I could. I digested every newspaper, everything I could, and I loved it. I was so passionate about the BBC. I'm still so passionate about the BBC, and probably lots of people listening to this will be like, 100 things to say about the BBC, because that's normally what I get. I don't want to pay my license fee and all this, but and from there I just, I worked there for a bit, and then I met another person for a coffee. It was always relationships, and they said, do you want some shifts here? And I moved into TV, and I spent a great 17 years at the BBC working across various different platforms, online, social, basically mainly in news and current affairs, in the breaking news covering lots of amazing events. I covered the royal wedding, all sorts of things, and I was the producer for several well-known presenters, and I had a great time, and it was a real family, and I loved everything about it. It was just one of the most wonderful times of my life, but it was also at times, stressful and dark, and it was literally dark. It was in the basement. I didn't see daylight sometimes, but I mean, who wouldn't? It's like, it was one of the best places to work, and
Great.
I would have stayed there if it wasn't for another chapter in my life that changed a lot, which we might come to later.
We will come out. Before we do it as well, because I do want to chat about that, but what a brilliant message for people, just that determination. And a couple of things. One, as I always said right at the beginning, find something that lights you up, that you love and that you're passionate about. Go and find a way to do that. Whatever it is, go and find a way to do it. And I'm really intrigued to know, especially because of where you were, I guess, in your head at that time, with what happened, obviously losing Michael, but then still following this part of your life to go, and then to have the ability to just go, the confidence, I guess, to go in and go, I'm going to come in and work here.
It's confidence, but that is the flip side of people with the characteristics, I guess, of, well, I will talk about my own experience. I won't put it on other people, but the characteristics of having an eating disorder also meant that I was quite a perfectionist, very detail orientated, controlling, determined, passionate. And all those things, when you use those for the good, like that got me that job. My editor still would say, she said, Laura, you're like a dog with a bone. Like, I would never say no, and I'm persistent, and I get shit done, and that is a great part of my nature that I still have and I still love, and I'm determined. But those same characteristics can be used to punish yourself and to hurt yourself, and I know now the difference. Like, we all have these character traits, and they're never going to change, and it's how you use them though, and I use them for the positive now, not for the negative. But all those things got me there because I was like a dog with a bone, and I knew I wanted, and I was passionate, and I still am passionate about being a journalist and stories. And I think being a journalist in the UK, I've travelled now to other parts of the world, and I think I was so grateful that you are allowed to have free speech here and to hold people to account, because in many other parts of the world you can't do that. And as much as, the BBC has its flaws, it has a lot, I do think it still lives by its values, which I think, impartiality. I was in many meetings, and many people would say, well, they're not impartial, but you go to other parts of the world and you realise how much we did check our facts and do things. And I'm only speaking, I was, as a journalist, I was always trying to be responsible and do that. But yeah, I loved it, and I was very determined.
It's amazing. It's great. Like I said, like, for me, I just think for people listening, and especially younger, like I said, for me, like thinking of my kids, I just want them do that, have that drive and that determination to follow that passion and follow that dream, whatever form, like to just get yourself in the door and go. And like, one of the biggest traits I try and say to, I just want them to be curious. I love it. Like especially Lucy, I go to bed at night, right, time to go to sleep now. And she's been a brilliant journalist because she open-ended questions, and I'm like, and no, she gets me every time. Like Kelly's the complete opposite. No, that's it, go to sleep. And I'm like, but Daddy, just one more thing, and an open-ended question. Next thing, I'm 20 minutes later, I'm still there. I'm trying to answer her questions because I haven't got it in me to go and stuff. But I just think like that is such a, for people listening.
It's a gift
like,
that you shouldn't ever try and squash, because, especially, and I think, children, I love children because they don't think about. Maybe I shouldn't say that because it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
At some point, that changes because society
Gets
says,
hold of us.
it's not really the done thing to say that right now. But curiosity is one of life's greatest parts of us, I think, and I think not enough people are curious.
I completely agree, and it's like I guess probably one of the reasons we love doing what we do so much with the thing is because I find it fascinating. Why I'm naturally just people will go, you're a bit nosy. Like, no, I'm just curious. And let's flip it onto that side because that sounds better than being nosy. But I do. It does fascinate me, and I think I loved that start of that journey. Just going, no, I'll come in and make the tea. I'm going to go and do it. Just find that because especially again, I'm trying to paint this picture, I guess, and or get an understanding of because of where you were in your head at times and what you explained, I guess, from your childhood and being bullied and that, but to take what you've experienced at that young throughout your childhood and up until that stage, you develop some tools to have that ability to go. I'm gonna have the confidence to go and do this, and that's really inspiring. I think to listen to that, it's so inspiring because, again, back to choice. You could have been defined by a lot of stuff that had happened in your past childhood. I guess losing Michael and grief around that, and your eating disorder, and all these little points in your life that you've shared with us today, and yet you still, again, back to the brave. There's that something inside you that went, this is my dream, this is my passion. I'm gonna go and do you, where you are right now, you go back and talk to Laura back then, what would you say to her back then? For all that you've learned from this.
It's so hard to even think that, because the Laura who I am today is I think actually, what would I say to her? I don't even know, because it's even 3 years ago. I think the Laura I am today from 3 years ago is probably a bigger gap.
Really?
Yeah. Because of 3 weeks that happened 3 years ago that changed my life beyond all recognition, really. Yeah.
Is this the point when you left the BBC? Can you talk about it?
Yeah. So I was. It was during the pandemic, and I was allowed to work from home. And I had moved. I'd been with my partner, my boyfriend, for like 6 years, and we were living in Hertfordshire. But I was allowed to work from home, and he was really sort of struggling with his mental health. And so we came to the countryside, or where I live now in East Sussex, and my mum was there, and his parents lived there, and we were only meant to come for a couple of weeks, to give him a bit of respite. And I thought, well, I can work from home, so it's fine. And my editor was fine about that. But after a couple of weeks, I thought, oh, you know, I've always been a country person, so I never wanted to live in the city. I don't know how I survived for 17 years. I still rode horses even when I would get up at 5 in the morning, like drive out to Edgware and ride a horse and then get like on the tube. And it was the only way I stayed sane, but I never wanted to live in the city. I've always been happiest in a pair of wellies with a dog or a horse or a field or a sheep. And so I was like, oh my God, this is like magic for me. But after, it must have been maybe 4 months we were down here, I could feel that our relationship was, it was not going the way I had hoped or he had hoped. And I learnt a lot about myself during that time. I realised how much attached I was to that relationship, and the fear of losing it turned me into a person that I was just like a shell of myself. I became the biggest people pleaser. I moulded myself into trying to be the best girlfriend, the best this, but I was living with the most horrific anxiety because I was just like, at any moment in time, this is going to end, and this is my world. He is my world, and I remember I knew it was coming. But I just buried my head in the sand, I suppose. And I remember I talked about it on my last episode, actually, Heartbreak. And I remember the day he came in from work, and I'd always get the anxiety of the footsteps coming up the door, thinking, not today. And then it was today. And he said, I can't do this to you anymore. I love you so much, but I don't know what's wrong with me, and I can't stay with you and keep putting you through this when I don't know what's wrong with me. And I don't know if it's us. And I remember I was like, oh my God. I think I didn't even clock it for the first 5 minutes, because I was like, oh, okay. And then suddenly the tears came. I guess it was like shock, and I was like, I couldn't stop. And I left that night, packed a bag. I think it was a Tesco's carry bag, thinking, I'll be back. But I never did go back. I haven't been back. And that was it. And the next week, so I packed a bag and went to my mum's, and the next week I also got a call from my editor at the BBC saying, I know this is really, really not a good time, Laura, but I'm going to need you back in the office. And I was like, not hope in hell. I'm waking up at night, I can't even breathe. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing with my life. I've got nowhere to live. And I cannot make that decision. But at the same time, like, the BBC was my identity. It had become, when we talk about success and identities, it was like, but that's what everyone knows me at. It was either Laura, the journalist at the BBC, or Laura, the one with the eating disorder, and I really didn't want the latter. So it was like, you know, I was a journalist at the BBC, and it still holds some precedence. And but without it, I didn't even know what I was good at, Sam. I didn't even know what I was good at. It was the only job I'd had. I'd had multiple different jobs in there, but and so I was very, you know, again, lucky. This is where you could take voluntary redundancy if you wanted. And I was like, oh, God. I just knew that I couldn't go back to the city on my own. I felt so alone as it was. Like, I had nowhere to live now. You know, what was I going to do? And so I thought, I'll be all right. I'll find my way. So I took it, and I just, I remember walking the fields, the coast, drumming myself out with like podcasts and songs, and just thinking, what is it that I love doing? I just thought, well, all I've ever loved is stories. Like, but what's that? What's that gonna do? What's that gonna get me? And I thought, yeah, but I can now tell the stories I want to tell. And but I ended up meeting my best friend, who is American, and that's another crazy story. But she introduced me to a different world, a different work world, with some very wealthy people who I learned a lot about the idea of value of money and how people perceive it, and their idea of success, which is we've already talked about. And that gave me a whole insight into another world. I went as looked at it as a journalistic lens and thought, God, this is fascinating. fascinating. These people are fascinating. That led me to some work, some paid work, and I became a writer and a content creator for this particular area of very wealthy people, and that was a lifeline. And I was doing this as long with healing from something that I never knew. I never knew heartbreak was anything that could literally feel like you can't breathe, and that your heart has been split in two. And it's such a, if people say, oh, I'm heartbroken, but I don't know if, I think I probably love very deeply, and I don't let that love in lightly, and I don't give it lightly. But when I do, like I always say, I'll walk coals for you, whether you're a friend or a family member or a boyfriend or whatever. Like, that's it. And so I found it very difficult, because it wasn't even a difficult. There were, no one cheated, and there were no.
Sure.
We didn't fall out of love, and so it has been a real process of healing. And but I say that those 3 weeks where I didn't have anywhere to live, I split with my boyfriend, or the love of my life, and I let go of my job. They were the 3 biggest sort of foundations in my life of how I'd created my identity, and overnight they had almost gone. And I thought, who am I? Like, and I also, I think my family were like, oh, she's going to go back into her eating disorder now. This is like, but I didn't.
What can you people, because like you said, listening to all them things, you'd be forgiven to think that would have been an option, I guess. But do you know what stopped you from doing that, and what?
I mean, don't get me wrong, I struggled, and I physically didn't want to eat, so I felt sick most of the time, and I did lose some weight, but I didn't ever. I've never had it that I wanted to go back into that place where I was before, because I just had, I don't know, I had the tools. I just still found the beauty. I'd be driving, back and forth to my sister's or my mum's, and I was surrounded by nature. I think nature has been such a massive part of my ability to not go backwards, because I would drive through the most beautiful countryside, and I'd be like looking at the fields thinking, oh my God, it's so beautiful here. I'm so grateful that I live here. And my sister said, you always manage to find gratitude even when you're like so broken. And that's why I called it Flip It, because actually of what she said is because I always find a negative and a positive, and I've always have been a glass half full person. Even when I was really sad, I've always looked at life through that. I know I feel lucky that that's the way I view the world. But I just found beauty even in the dark, and nature was a real part of that. I would walk on the beach, I would walk in the hills, and I would surround myself with my horse. And when people say, oh my God, why would you get up at 5 and go and muck out, or like cost you a fortune, or this or that? And I'm like, you don't know, it's like immeasurable. Like, I don't think I would be a sane person if I didn't have horses or fields around me. Even when I've go into London and I come out, as soon as I start to see on the train the fields, I feel I can breathe again. And I think that was a big part of nature, and was a big part of me not wanting to go back. But also, I wasn't that same person anymore. I'd got the tools. I speak to people. I have conversations. I share, and even sitting here today and talking about this is kind of cathartic for me, because for so long I would just bottle everything up, and it literally ate me up. And I think when you talk or you share, it kind of releases something, and I didn't want it to be a secret. I also couldn't do it to my family again. I knew that there was never going to be any money to put me back into treatment or anywhere. There was nothing, and I had matured. I don't know. And I also just wanted to live, and I thought, Laura, you can find your way. You will find your way. My gosh, I have crafted out a whole world that I think every conversation I have now, and how I met you, every single person I meet now is because of what happened. Those I never thought I'd ever say it at the time, but he gave me the biggest gift ever, because I would have been too scared to leave. Even though I knew that there were some things wrong and we needed to work on things, I would never have left the BBC because I would have been too scared. I'd have been like, well, what? I can't do anything without it. Like, I don't know what I can do. And I probably would have never found somewhere to live that wasn't back in London or somewhere where I already had some familiarity. And I have a beautiful home now. Not a beautiful home in a big mansion or anything. I rent a one bedroom but it's a beautiful home that's mine. And I have a little dog that was given to me, and she is like the most beautiful part of my life, because she was given to me. She's adopted. She's a rescue as well. And she was given to me by some lovely people who rescued me and gave me a house when I needed it. And I have built a community of friends that I never even knew I could feel like I belong somewhere in a small village. I would never have met you because I would have just been living the same life, the default life, and I would have settled for it. But that catalyst was the catalyst I needed. It was like the rocket up the arse that I needed to change my life. And my life, I have grown so much in confidence, Sam. Like, I would never have created Flip It. I would never have, done half of what I've done. I feel like the growth I've made, if we talk about growth, that's a really irritating word. Even I find that irritating when people say I've grown so much. But I think I would just not be doing what I'd be doing now, or found my purpose or my passion, if I had stayed the same. And those 3 weeks were one of the most momentous chapters of my life that has gone on to create the best chapter of my life. That it just feels like I'm living in a world that is so amazing. And every conversation I have now is because of what happened in those 3 weeks. And so if anyone is listening and thinks, I really didn't want that door to end or close, or that chapter to end, or that door to close, that's the right way around, because I really didn't want any of those 3 chapters or doors to close. I'm so grateful that they did. And you will be okay. You will find your way. You just have to live with an open heart, and be curious and talk to people, and people will save you. There is fundamentally more kindness in this world than there is not. And you just have to look for it. It's not very far either.
What a beautiful story. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant. It's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events, enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. I mean, I've listened to that episode on Heartbreak, and it was really powerful and told beautifully by you as well. But because one of the things, obviously, I wrote down around the inspiration behind Flip It, and you just listen to you articulate that in that way. And again, back to that thing of hope to people, like just people listening, just going, wherever we are in our lives, whatever's going on, if we can find something in there, whether it be nature, there's a couple of things. One, find something that that can fulfil us in a certain way, or take that gamble, take that risk, because we don't know. Like life is an opportunity, right? And we get up every day, and we can practice gratitude and go, I'm just grateful that I'm here, and the sun's shining maybe today, which it has been, which is lovely.
It sounds so
And
cliche. It sounds so cliche, this
does.
gratitude thing. But I, you can find something to be grateful for every day, even if you just like a moment of the sun on your face, or a smile in someone's someone walking down the street. I often look at other people and find gratitude. In fact, I was in London the other week, and I was coming out the tube station, London Bridge, and everyone was rushing around, and this guy bumped into this elderly lady, and I watched them, and I thought, oh, you know, he might just run off or hasn't got time. And he's turned around and he stopped and put his arm around her and said, I'm so sorry. And she said, oh no, don't worry, dear. And it was just like, I don't know, it made my heart warm, because he didn't do what I stupidly or assumed that he might, was just like run off. And she wasn't really irate. It was just a real moment of sharedness that I just thought I found gratitude in that. Like, I don't know, you can find it anywhere, but it does sound a very cheesy thing to say.
But
it has saved me.
and it will. So when I listen, I think I shared a message out when I had my knee done, and I'm sitting there, and I started. I've never done it before, but I started a gratitude diary then, because I'm really grateful actually for my life is quite abundant. I get up and do loads of amazing things. Right? I get to sit and do a podcast, or go and host an event later, and I've got beautiful kids, and I swim in the sea. It's an abundant. I can get up most days, and there's loads of things going on, and I'm abundant. So there's so much to be grateful for. But then when I was just sitting there, I couldn't do anything, and I was just sitting with my leg up and going, okay, but I started it then, because you go, sometimes you can just find gratitude in just the smallest things, like getting up and having a shower one day. I was fucking grateful for that. You know what I mean? So when you strip it back and you go, there is so much beauty in this world, and there's so much to be grateful for.
It's easier to be grateful when things are going okay, right?
Yeah.
And when I talked about that woman that I mentioned who's in a war zone right now, I bet she's really struggling to find gratitude. It's very easy for us to be sitting here and saying, but you have to work harder, and when it's when the things that aren't going so right, that's when you have to really look for it, because otherwise you do end up dark, and we don't need any more darkness in this world. And I do want to give you some credit, and I think I don't know if I've told you enough, but how rich you've made my life. It was a very random encounter, but I never think anything is random. And you have given out so much generosity and kindness to me, without ever expecting anything in return, and been one of the most warm, beautiful souls that I have come to meet, and been so grateful that you've turned up in my life. And I just wanted to say thank you so much, because Sam, you are just like, you're so solid. I love you with all my heart, and you have, you're just full of light. You attract it.
It's very kind. Listen, the feeling's mutual. Like I say, I remember messaging you the day after we met, just because I was vulnerable that day, right? I sat there, and stuff come at me that day that I hadn't shared in that form before. Went to a dark place for myself that I just didn't, hadn't relived. I don't think as deep as I did in that space that day. But without knowing me, there was just this warmth and compassion back at me. Right, you held me that day and was like, it's okay, and I felt
it was that vulnerability
okay.
that I loved in you, and I was just, it was what attracted me to you, because you were willing to be vulnerable, and I just thought, God, that guy, he needs a hug, and I'm such a hugger.
I didn't need that.
So, but I just thought
I
thought you were brave, and I just loved, you being willing to share some scars and some wounds, because we all have them.
We do, and how grateful I am for you to like today as well. Like in your podcast, you do, and like I say, you tell it so beautifully. Like you are, it's a gift. You've got a gift as a storyteller. Wow, you've just got this incredible gift, and I'm so glad that you brought it to the world and people get the opportunity to listen to it, and how you articulate stuff and how you read them stories. It just gets you. Like I think I've listened to that Heartbreak one about 10 times. Just purely just the way you tell it, and you can feel, you almost feel like you're there with you, like that emotion.
It took a few times to write
Yeah,
that and to read it without me going. Oh.
I can imagine. I can imagine. But it is, it's a bit, and you're able to share that, and like I think again, it's back to these. The thing I want the listeners to get from, and I want to share these type of stories, and I want to talk about people's struggles and how they overcome them. And one of the reasons why is because actually, if we can give people hope and find inspiration in dark times, in stuff like, because on paper, those 3 weeks and were terrible. And I'm not saying that, but look at what you've come out of
I'm
that.
so
Like,
grateful that those 3 weeks happened,
Yeah.
and I also want to make sure that my ex partner boyfriend, like, there is no hostility or anything.
Sure.
He is a great human, a really great human, and it's just people don't I people are on you grow together and you grow apart and you're not the same person, and I've never thought there's one person for one person in this world. I just think we're different people all the time, and they're different chapters of your story, right? And each one teaches you something. Michael taught me something, taught me a lot, but everyone is there to show you something if you look for it. And so I just wanted to make sure that the listeners knew that he's a good human. He's a good human.
And I guess like what advice, like listen to the different chapters in your life, and you've been able to share some really dark times, as well as what happened with the heartbreak side of stuff, and all it. People listening, what with you through your experiences, what advice would you give people if they're in a situation as you've been, not in a great what from your experience, what advice could you give someone? Like,
I think just know that how you feel in this moment right now is not how you'll feel in even maybe an hour, 2 hours tomorrow. It may take weeks, but just know that it does change. Feelings never stay the same, and also that you can't have one without the other. There is no love without loss. There is no light without dark, joy without sorrow. And so if you want to experience the highs, you have to experience the lows. And the lows are often the biggest teachers. And when I was really sick, I was a mute. I was numb to all of them. And I didn't want to feel the lows, but that also meant that I didn't feel the highs. And my goodness, feeling the highs and experiencing the joy in life and the light in life and the love in life is just magic. And I would never swap feeling nothing for not experiencing the lows, because the lows also, they then make you appreciate the highs, and so you can't have one without the other. And so I would just say that life is a multitude of emotions and feelings that change all the time, and each one is there to teach you something. Like sadness, anger, disappointment, rejection, they're not negative. It's how you look at them and the opportunity or the lessons you learn from them. They're as the greatest teachers as much as happiness or joy or whatever it is. I think the fundamental thing that I've learned of how I equate, is it happiness? I don't know. I'm not happy all the time. I feel content more, but I think the biggest contribution to that has been to contribute outside of myself, to be a contributor to this world, and by giving you are rewarded beyond anything. The more you put out in this world, you're not giving up part of yourself, you're gaining so much of yourself. Like,
love that.
yeah, when you give, you're gifted in ways that you never even imagined. I just think, do things without expecting anything in return, and you will be rewarded without you even knowing, and in ways you never even thought. That is, so I guess just know that your feelings change. You can't have one without the other, and that having them all is the most beautiful part of being human. And to be brave and jump in and do the thing that you're scared of.
Oh, it's so like, and you know, I am conscious. I'm on this journey. I talk about these things, and that resonates and sits with me. I guess one of the reasons we've connected so much, like just how the lens in which we look at life and how we can see it is like that, right? That's I completely agree. Like, we go out and we can, and it sounds sometimes people, you know, this started, as mentioned, as a business podcast, and all of a sudden I'm talking, I'm conscious of.
Yeah, I haven't really talked much about business.
But that's what I mean. But I don't want it.
I don't know much about business.
It's gone completely. That's why I'm saying, like, the conversations I have now are these, as opposed to me. Like, I want, because ultimately I want to create a world that is finding people's fulfillment and contentment, and it's not just about, that's what I find face, because I was like, I've got to find happiness, and we've got, like, actually it's okay to feel
what
sad.
is that though, Sam? How do you define happiness? I mean, I don't define happiness. I mean, it's just such a weird word that we're all looking for. I think most people are really just looking for the same thing: belonging and love. To feel loved and to feel heard and to feel seen.
To love and be loved, right? That is what I think, like that thing. And like I said, it sounds a bit woo, but I'm like, that if that's why we're here, then let's create a world where it is more like that. If we can all feel this abundance and joy in the fact of, like you said, giving without receiving, and finding the joy in that.
And it comes from the title of your own podcast, Different Hats, championing difference. You know, I do not want a world where the tapestry all looks the same. I want a world of difference. People who feel that they can show up with whatever they've got, you know, like whoever they are, whatever colour, you know, paint the rainbow, like be more different, because for so long I wanted to fit in, and I moulded myself into the way the world I thought it wanted me to be. And now I love the difference. I love a splatterwork of artwork of different people, because that's where we learn from each other. That's where we think, oh my God, there is a different way to look at life. There is a different experience. And we're all actually pretty similar as a baseline, but we all have our own little colourful layers. And I think that's what makes the world, like, fun. Like, otherwise we're all going to be grey.
So you're so right, and it is, and it drives me mad almost, the societal pressures of where we should be and the boxes that we need to be in, and and I'm not. No, this is not a world that I want. It's not a world I want my kids to grow up in. I want them to grow up in exactly that, where there is a complete. Look, Lucy's, I've spoke about this before, is really gender fluid, and she's identifies now as a girl. She's shown me she's educated me more than anyone around the differences. She's so in touch with who she is as a human being. And it's magical. Like, she's 9 years old and more advanced on that than I am at 45. And I'm sitting here, because I'll often reference on here about the book by Bronnie Ware about the regrets of the dying. And the biggest regret of the dying is that I've not lived a life true to myself. Like, trying to find that, and I'm still on a journey to find that. And yet I've got this 9-year-old daughter who knows exactly who she is, and
I just think meet people as a human. That's what we all are. Who cares? Like, I don't care who you sleep with, or like what colour your hair is, whether you've got one leg, or I mean, we're all just human. Just meet someone as a human, and make everybody feel seen and heard and worthy of being on this planet, because we all do. And
I love that. We're coming towards the end. There's a couple of bits that I just did want to touch on as well, very quick, because it was, when I was looking through the thing, I wanted to talk about Jigsy Place. Tell me a little bit about it, because I wasn't aware of that, and especially as I know you're a mental health advocate, and I mean, look, bit coming on here and sharing on here your story and journey, I know will help so many people. But just tell me a little bit about that. I don't know much.
Yeah, Jigsy. Oh my gosh, that was something that I created. When I came back from the States, I was really looking for somewhere where I could belong and feel like I fitted in. And whenever I was looking for support groups or whatever, I didn't really find anything that was other than very dark, or full of negative stories around mental health. And so I created this place called Jigsy, which was like an art-based platform where people could share their piece in the puzzle. Because I guess, like I said before, I always felt like I didn't fit in, but I created a place called Jigsy. It was short for Jigsaw, and it was an art-based platform where people could share their piece of their puzzle, and I put them all together on Instagram and it would create one big jigsaw piece puzzle where everyone felt like they fitted in. They shared their story, and it would be a collage or a painting or a scribble or a journal note or whatever of how they were feeling about their mental health. And it was a representation of that, and I just thought it would create a colourful place where everyone felt like they fitted in because their piece of the puzzle went to create a greater puzzle. And so I ran it, and I did lots of workshops with it. I did some stuff with the Prince's Trust. I did a lot of charity work. I created confidence and identity workshop, and I did a lot of that. But it kind of came to an organic ending, really, myself. And but it was, another something that I did. But I guess another part I've done a lot, and I'm continuing to do. In fact, I'm launching something next month, which I will announce soon. But something around mental health in the workplace, because I another part, I guess, a chapter that I haven't really talked about. So I'll just give you a little bit of context. Is that I was part of a mental health campaign internally within the BBC called Open Up, which was basically commissioned and championed by a wonderful guy in the BBC who had gone through depression and wanted to create a campaign which was ran kind of at the same time as the Head Together campaign that the Royals ran, around getting people to talk about their mental health. And in the workplace, I'd experienced that, and the stigma and the judgment and the people not knowing what to say to me, and me not talking about it and worrying about my career and thinking, well, I can't be vulnerable, and they'll think I'm not good at my job. I had all of that. That's a whole other area that I really struggled with, and why I hid it for so long. We created a campaign where 5 people shared their story. We all have various different mental health issues. PTSD as a camera woman in Afghanistan, and OCD and depression, all sorts of things. And we shared our stories, and it ran as a campaign, and it still runs. In fact, I had someone text me a couple of months ago and said, "Oh, your post is at the Radio 5 Live printers." And I thought, oh my gosh, that was so long ago. But it really helped. I was terrified of doing it at the time when I was asked. I thought, no. And I thought, well, everyone knows anyway. I'm going to talk about it. And I did, and the feedback that I had was just brilliant. Like, I was so worried when it went live that, oh my God, now everyone knows. Oh my God, everyone knows now. It's like shedding skins, like being raw. And it went out. The BBC is a big place. It went out to everywhere. And but all I was given was, do you know what? I'm struggling with that too. I felt like that too. Who do I talk to? And it was another, I guess, storytelling exercise. And so I've been thinking about this other area of my life that I do a lot of around mental health in the workplace. And so yeah, I will be launching something soon.
Love that. I mean, it's, you talk about contributing to the world, and the difference that by you being you and doing the things that you're doing is having such a huge impact. And I can guarantee how many lives that you will save by doing the things that you're doing. I know that when you talk about it in that sense, but like the power of the story that you've got to share, and how you do that, and how you then shed the light on other people's stories and allow them to do that. It's so powerful. And how many people will listen that maybe been in that place, maybe in a good place, and but have come through that and want to then come on and share their story, because if we can, it still blows my mind that the statistics I always talk about suicide. I can't get my head around it. I really can't, and I'm like, until we as a society have more people like you who are able to open and talk about these things, then. And this becomes the norm. We are able. There's no shame to it. That we can talk openly and honestly. That narrative will start to change, and there will be a shift, and that rate might start to come down.
Yeah, because it's actually part of our superpower. Like, there's a lot of talk around ADHD. All sorts of neurodiverse people, but they're like amazing. We're all amazing. We all are on a bit of a spectrum. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Like, I have tendencies. And I spent some time with a group of kids the other day. They go to this place. They are some have autism and some have severe ADHD. But my goodness, they are the graphics that these guys are making. They're doing graphic design and they're doing animation. They're like geniuses. Oh my God. And they're contributing so much. They're now like selling stuff on Etsy and things and working in tech companies. And I was just like, these labels that we give people are as if they're like, oh, something's wrong with them. No. We're all here. We're all kind of a bit like crazy in our heads, right? Or at least I'm speaking for myself here.
Yeah.
But I think
I'm with you.
like that's what's brilliant, and it's just I just think we have to just like meet people where they are and champion the differences and the weirdnesses and the misfits and just I'm an open book now, because for so long I was a closed book, and I'm just as I am, and I guess it's like Marmite, isn't it? You either like it or you don't. But I don't know how, like when you say I don't know how to be any other way now. I can't live being a different version of Laura. I just have to be Laura now, and I hated that. I hated being me, but I'm okay now with being Laura, I think. ... I'm still working on it, but yeah.
Do you feel that throughout your journey, looking over the different periods, like where you are right now, the closest to your, I guess, like back to that authentic self thing, like do you feel the closest to that where you are now?
100%, yeah. And when I say I feel the happiest, that word again, or most contented in my entire life now is now. I feel like I'm only just starting to live, Sam. I really do. My mum always said, I just want you to fly. Like, she also said, I just want you. And I was like, oh my God, I've got no wings. Had life if I've got no wings, I can't go anywhere. And now honestly, I feel like I'm flying like a butterfly everywhere. And I really feel like I'm in myself. I'm like okay with being me, and being Laura. Like, I really just love learning about myself. There's things that I really have learned that I don't like about myself, and I really am working on those. There are things that, because I want to be a better person to people around me, and I have to own it when I get it wrong, and to be responsible. And we're just humans. Well, I will still get it wrong. We all get it wrong, but I want to learn from those, and I just am beyond happy. I'm far happiest in my life now than I ever have been. That really wasn't very articulate, so you have to edit that bit out. But yeah, I am. Yeah, I feel like I'm just starting to live. Yeah, I'm starting to fly. Yeah.
Amazing. As we're coming to the end now, and I'll share the last question with you that I have. Just before we do, I'm just so grateful, honestly, that for being so open and honest. And
I wonder how many times you said grateful in this episode.
Yeah,
someone will have to clock it.
There's there's a lot of gratitude going on here. There's a lot of gratitude, but it's been, I know it would be. But listen, let's finish off with that last question. This has come from our storytelling dinners that we do, which I am going to get you along to at some
I know
point.
it's not your fault. It's my fault.
Well, you will come, but this is one that comes out a lot, and I really like this because I want to leave people with something. I guess a lesson that people would learn. So get to the end, your deathbed. The one lesson that you would leave behind, what would it be?
I thought about this as I was driving here because I knew you were going to ask me. And I will try and give you one because you know I like to give a few. I do love a word. Live your life with an open heart no matter what.
Beautiful.
No matter how much you want to close it and how much it gets hurt, keep it open and you'll find your way.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on, for coming into my life, and just being on here and sharing your inspiring, brave, brilliant story with me. I guarantee, and I know that it will help so many people when they do listen. So, and continue sharing stories and your story because it is a true inspiration. It really is. So, thank you so much. It's been a beautiful conversation that I knew it would be, and I know that we're going to have many, many more. Not one line, obviously, but we will have many more in the years to come. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam. It's been just like having a chat with a friend in a cozy room, and I am so happy to have been here. And I think the best thing is that you have come into my life, and yeah, I will be grateful for that again for the rest of my life. So thank you for having me.
And as they say, is a wrap.